أفلا يتدبرون القرآن أم على قلوب أقفالها.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Muslims believe the Quran to be the perfectly preserved book of God, the all-knowing creator of the universe. That is the claim made by the Quran itself, and it's a claim that can easily be tested or refuted. The Quran itself gives us a sound falsification test. Then do they not reflect upon the Quran? If it had been from any other than Allah, they would have found within it much contradiction. The term contradictions here encompasses both internal contradictions within the text of the book and external contradictions or disagreement with undeniable objective facts that have been established based on clear evidence. Here, the Quran challenges the reader to falsify it by pointing out contradictions in the text. Failing to find any valid internal contradictions, many skeptics propose the existence of instances where they believe the Quran contradicts established undeniable scientific facts. If this claim is true, the Quran cannot be the verbatim words of God, and to claim that it is the word of God while containing clear errors would mean that either God was ignorant of that science or he provides false information in the Quran, both of which go against the nature of God. In other words, it would make Islam false. Due to the serious implications of this, it's important to address the arguments presented by these critics to see if there is actual merit to the claim. One of the most common arguments made by modern critics is that the Quran claims the sun sets in a muddy spring. So he followed away. Until he reached the setting of the sun, he found it setting in a spring of dark mud. This verse is referring to the great king Dhul-Qarnayn, who traveled the globe establishing justice and monotheism wherever he went. Regardless, it seems strange that the Quran would claim that the sun sets in a spring, especially while we now have the factual heliocentric model of the solar system. However, on taking a closer look, we notice that the Quran here uses perception and not absolute reality. The verse reads, "He found it sitting in a spring," which shows clearly that it is speaking from Dhul-Qarnayn's perspective. The use of perspective with the word wajada, or found, is also present within the same chapter in verse 77. The verse reads, "And they found therein a wall about to collapse." However, the actual Arabic wording is فَوَجَدُوا فِيهَا جِدَارٌ يُرِيدُ أَن يَنقَضَّ, which would directly translate to "They found a wall that wanted to collapse." This verse shows that from their perspective, Musa and his companion saw a wall that looked like it wanted to collapse. But since clearly walls don't have desires, we know the actual meaning of the verse is that the wall was on the verge of collapsing. This is another use of the word "to find" within the very same chapter as a means of conveying the subject's perspective. In verse 86, the Quran is describing Dhul-Qarnayn's view of the sun sinking below the horizon and is using a visual description. This is also the view held by the most prominent classical exegetes or explainers of the Quran, such as Ibn Kathir. Thus, it is not an error. We can now turn our attention to a related accusation, the accusation that the Quran espouses a geocentric model of the solar system, wherein the sun and moon orbit a stationary earth. But is that really what it says? And it is He who created the night and the day, and the sun and the moon, all in an orbit are swimming. When we pay attention, you see it doesn't say what the critics think it says. The earth is not mentioned in this verse at all, let alone as the center of revolution of the sun and moon. Rather, The verse makes the statement that each floats in an orbit. This is a factually true statement, as it has recently been discovered by astronomers that the sun does move in an orbit around the massive black hole in the center of the Milky Way galaxy. Both so-called major scientific errors we've looked at so far have turned out to be based on misunderstandings of the text and not on flaws of the Quran itself. Interestingly, not long ago, people used to believe that the Quran was wrong on its stance about the movements of the sun. Many people in the modern day still believe the sun is completely stationary, but modern scientists know better. They know now that the Quran was right. The science changed. The Quran never needed to. That is why we must avoid treating modern science, which is always evolving, as the yardstick by which we measure the timeless speech of the all-knowing Creator. In future videos, inshallah, we'll take a further look into more of the most common accusations made against the Quran in terms of supposed scientific errors, and perhaps explore some of the many instances where science actually catches up to the Quran. The truth doesn't fear questions or examination, and Allah knows best.
سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق أولم يكف بربك أنه على كل شيء شهيد